July 6, 2019, 4:12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here in California, and still quite a bit of earthquake activity occurring down in the Southern California region. Right now the earthquake 3D globe off to the right side is only showing 4.5 magnitude earthquakes and above, following the 7.1 earthquake last night. The reason why is because of the huge multitude of magnitude 2 earthquakes and 3 earthquakes, and many others below that range were just completely cluttering the globe and actually resetting it to where it would only actually show 1 or 2 earthquakes on the globe. Very irritating. So I went ahead and rephrased it to show only 4.5 and above, or somewhere around 4.5. Looks like they're showing some 4.4s in there as well, but we will not see the earthquake clutter on the earthquake 3D globe, just because of the multitudes of them going on right now. So anything above that will definitely show up, and it will show up on these live seismograph stations as well. I have lost the data once again down in the Ridgecrest area. That's a station down there on the very bottom, China Lake region. No data coming in once again, and I've tried to get numerous other stations around there, but for some reason they're disconnected and they're not working at the moment. It's possible the USGS has it blocked from public view, meaning that we're unable to access the data at the moment, but I will keep trying. Either way, if we have a larger earthquake, it's definitely going to show up on any of these other California stations here in San Andreas Fault System in Hollister, also Mammoth Lakes, California, just north of there. So there's no issue with seeing a larger quake play out. Here is the most recent map from the USGS Caltech Seismic Network. Really cool. I kind of like using this one. This is the old version, right? It's got the old squares. I know a lot of folks use the newer ones with the circles, but I kind of like this. I've always seen it as a, I don't know, maybe this is just what I'm used to. But either way, folks, almost 3,000, count that, 3,000 earthquakes, 2,975 to be exact, since the 6.4 took place here over a couple days now, over 48 hours ago. So tremendous amount of earthquake activity. Before we seen the 7.1, we were looking at about 1,600 earthquakes, I believe. So that number has doubled, and now we're just seeing that huge number there following that 7.1 there last night. Still a lot of earthquakes happening, folks. Many hundreds and hundreds in the 3 and 2 range, and possibly thousands that have not been accounted for yet, meaning ones that the seismologists have not been able to sort through just because of the frequency of the amount of earthquakes that are happening in this swarm. And this is pretty much a swarm. It was a swarm back when it first started a couple days ago, so now we're just continuing with that activity. And looking at the area, just the overview here right now, there's definitely some earthquake activity occurring away from the 7.1 area. To the north, it looks as though it may be headed towards the north area, towards the Coso volcanic type field. There was a statement issued from the Coso volcanic observatory that all conditions are normal. The volcano area is green. There's no uplift in any type of calderas out there, and there's no imminent threat of an eruption, although it's very close. All the swarming's very close to that region, so who's to know what's going to happen here over the next couple days, if it's going to stir the ancient volcano lava domes down there or not. We'll have to keep an eye on it. If it does, I think I'm going to be heading down there and do some exploring down there, and definitely be live streaming from that area if something does happen here soon. I'm about a 6-hour drive from that area, which is nothing. because I normally drive 8 to 10 hours every day when I'm out storm chasing in the Oklahoma and Texas region. So you can bet I will be driving down there if something else happens. Here's another map here of the area, just a different version. You can still see earthquakes spread out all over the place, spread out in a line from kind of northwest to southeast there, and of course a little bit older earthquake activity towards the southwest. We're seeing some renewed activity, newer earthquake activity over here towards the northeast, and also up towards the north where that little swarming activity is taking place there. And definitely quite a bit of activity, folks. As you've seen on the earthquake 3D globe, it looks as though the largest quake since that 7.1 last night looks to be a 5.5. Now there is a significant chance of a 6.0 or greater happening here over a week time frame. And I'm gonna play the latest news conference here from the USGS folks, just in case anyone missed it or might want to hear it again. I think it's only appropriate to play it up in an updated video in regards to this activity, so I will get to that here in just a minute. But let's get back here to this map. Nothing major, nothing worse has happened, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say, which is kind of a good thing, right? Because we don't want to see any major damage down there. I know there's definitely been there is major damage, but it could be so much worse if we happen to see something stir the pot there on the San Andreas fault system, and that wouldn't be a good thing. So what I'm going to do here real quick is find out what I did with this video, and I'm going to pop it up and I'm going to play it here and include this here in the updated video. Stand by for just a second here. Okay, so we'll move that up here, and hopefully this will all play for everyone well, and we'll watch this video out here. So stand by just a second here as I get this going. It's just a little off here today. Once again, nothing new.
All right, good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm Mark Ghilarducci, Director of Governor Newsom's Office of Emergency Services. Here at the State Operations Center, we're in the second operational period following the 7.1 magnitude earthquake that struck up in the Ridgecrest area. Let me start off by really conveying our continued thoughts and with all the folks that have been impacted by this and the communities. They have had a week-long series of earthquakes and an earthquake swarm, and then of course they had the large 6.4 and now the 7.1, and they have been through a lot, both in Ridgecrest in Kern County and in Trona in San Bernardino County, and so that whole area there, we are continuing to keep them in our thoughts and prayers and working very, very diligently to support all of their efforts. Today, as the sun came up, we started to get better situational awareness from local authorities and state assets that are on the ground in both communities. We're happy to report that there is damage. As we reported last night, there were a number of structure fires. There were gas leaks. The power was out for a majority of the communities. There was road damage. Rock slides, etc. Things you would see in an earthquake of this magnitude. But again, the damage that we are seeing this morning in the light is not as extensive as one could have expected. Now, keep that in mind that we are going to be continuing to do extensive damage assessments, will require a detailed review. And for those individuals and homes and the local governments that are continuing to respond, all assets continue to be provided, both fire and rescue, urban search and rescue, law enforcement, mutual aid assets continue to be made available and are engaged throughout the region. Last night, there was shelters that were open, and the population of the shelter reached just about 200, a little under 200. You know, as a series of aftershocks are occurring, it's you know, makes sense and logical that people would be a little bit concerned about being in their homes. And so we saw larger shelter populations last night. The Red Cross continues to support those shelters. But in addition, logistically, we have moved into place a significant amount of support in the way of cots, water, meals, and other commodities to make available as necessary. Also happy to report that the major grocery stores with commodity distribution points are back operational. That's a very significant positive step to ensure that those local supermarkets and other local community stores can be made available for individuals to be able to get supplies and food and other commodities as they begin to do their cleanup of damages. Still quite a bit of non-structural damage in each of the homes. People reporting things like glass breaking and shelves that have been overturned, etc. But there have been also structural damage to homes, and as I mentioned earlier, some structural fires predominantly driven by broken gas mains. Today, the power is virtually back on across the city of Ridgecrest. There's a small portion that still is out, and roughly 46 or so customers. And in Trona, the power is still generally out, working on that to try to get the power back up today. In addition, water is, they're finding not as big of an issue, although we've got water commodities available should it be necessary. Right now, both communities are reporting that they have enough water. So those critical lifelines are important and continue to be monitored by us. The state will, of course, as you know, yesterday, Governor Newsom did request from the White House a presidential emergency declaration. The emergency declaration is a declaration for immediate direct federal assistance. That allows us to turn to our federal partners and get life-saving assets. With us today is Bob Fenton, the regional administrator from FEMA. FEMA is already engaged here with us at the State Operations Center as a result of the quick request by Governor Newsom. FEMA has been providing already support for us on the ground. We're also deploying today damage assessment teams and structural engineers in support of Kern County and San Bernardino County, and that's really to go in and start looking at a little bit more granular review of the damage that has occurred. That helps us to build what are we looking at like in total losses, destroyed, damaged, major, minor, to be able to put that information together to make the request for a major disaster declaration. At this point, the State Operations Center is in Level 1 full operation, will remain this way until further notice. The governor has approved all assets of the state to be made available. He updated the state of emergency last night to include San Bernardino and to reflect the new damages associated with the 7.1 that occurred last night. Today, our effort is really going to be to continue to work with both San Bernardino and Kern County, and of course the cities, the town of Trona and the city of Ridgecrest, have had, again, further discussions with the elected leaders and the operational folks, police chiefs and fire chiefs in both communities this morning. That link is that communication link is working very well. Communications overall from cell capability and other communications modalities are working well, and that's also positive. And you'll hear a little bit in a minute that while we've had a significant amount of impact to our roads last night, throughout the night, Caltrans did an unbelievable job in working to get roads patched and fixed and rock slides cleared. While we're, of course, responding to this, we are monitoring the weather conditions. It is going to be in the high 90s, low hundreds over the next day or so. There will be some warm, gusty winds from 25 to 35 miles per hour. This is significant because individuals possibly not wanting to go back in their home. We're going to want to make sure that there'll be enough cooling centers and other kinds of things like water and shade to make sure that we don't have secondary issues. We're also monitoring fire weather activity throughout that part of the state and other parts of the state with regards to potential for wildfire, and Chief Porter from CAL FIRE will mention that in a few minutes. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to the Commissioner of the California Highway Patrol, Commissioner Warren Stanley, or talk about CHP's support.
Thank you, Director Ghilarducci. As far as the CHP, we have approximately 68 personnel assigned to this incident. Started out, most of them were escorting some of the big rigs that are carrying supplies up to the Ridgecrest, Trona area. We also have a number of personnel that are also providing law enforcement services to our law enforcement partners there, the police department, the sheriff's department, and the fire department. We also have 3 of our airships up there, 2 helicopters and an airplane. The helicopters are using their thermal imaging capabilities to look for additional gas leaks and fires, and they're also assisting with damage assessment. Our airplane is also helping to check out some of the roadways in the area to make sure they're clear and no additional damage. And Director Kim will talk about that in a few moments. Also, our officers on the ground that are providing that roving patrol, they're also checking on all the state facilities in those areas to try to do a preliminary damage assessment to make a determination.
Main Shock at the northeast end.
Open on Monday when
Then that was
business goes back into action. So that's what we're doing now. We have a great team working together, working here with the other state agencies and our law enforcement partners in the area of Ridgecrest and up in Trona. And with that, I'll turn it over to Major Baldwin.
Morning, everybody. The California Military Department has 300 personnel on duty in response to this incident. We're flying missions in support of other response agencies to move responders and supplies into the area. We are also going to be flying both manned and unmanned surveillance aircraft to assist with damage assessment. We've moved 200 personnel in the vicinity of the incident to be ready to respond to requests for support from law enforcement or any other agency. And the rest of the California National Guard and California State Guard are ready in the event that additional military capability is required. We've coordinated with officials at the Pentagon, and if we need additional out-of-state support, they've committed that they'll be able to help us quickly if that's necessary. I'll be followed by Chief Tom Porter from CAL FIRE, who I'll trip over.
Good morning. CAL FIRE, California's fire department, is fully staffed at peak levels to support this event, as well as be prepared for any wildfires that may occur throughout the state during this period. Also, our Office of the State Fire Marshal is engaged with pipeline inspections under their jurisdiction and certifying that those are being done, and the petroleum pipelines that they are looking at are safe to operate, and assessing, along with DGS, our responsibilities under the state building assessment. Thank you. I'll be followed by David Kim, Secretary, California Transportation Agency.
Good morning. There is good news to
At
report on the
4:07
status of
yesterday
roadways
morning.
impacted by
And-
last night's event. All repairs have been made. All roads are now open. As the director indicated at the outset, in particular, State Route 178 sustained significant damage last night. Caltrans crews worked overnight to repair that damage. They also cleared all rock slides on State Route 178, State Route 127, and State Route 190. Also, all state bridges have been fully inspected and cleared for safety. And finally, Caltrans staff is in touch with local officials to provide any assistance for any needed inspections. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Marco Meach, Deputy Secretary, Health and Human Services.
Thank you. Good morning. We have fully activated across our agency, and that includes the Emergency Medical Services Authority, the California Department of Public Health, and the California Department of Social Services. Secretary Galley is in communication with the local hospital, and we are not tracking any unmet needs at the time. We're also looking and are in contact with all the medical, health, and community care facilities in the region and are not tracking any unmet need. As Director Ghilarducci noted, we do have a shelter that is active in that area, and we're not tracking any unmet need at that shelter either. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Bob Fenton. I'm the FEMA Region 9 Regional Administrator. We've been coordinating closely with the State of California Office of Emergency Services since July 4th and the first earthquake. Following the event last night, we went ahead and deployed all the key federal agencies and departments up here to work with OES and state agencies to make sure that if there's any resource that the state needs to aid those impacted, that it's available and ready. We've gone ahead and pre-positioned some resources and will continue to coordinate with the state. As Mark had talked about, the next step is actually doing preliminary damage assessments to see if what other federal authorities may be brought to bear to help those in the recovery of this event. That concludes my briefing. Thank you.
So we just came out of an hour-long briefing with the governor, and to reiterate the priorities that he set for us, and what we'll continue to work here in the State Operations Center over the next operational period is to obviously continue to support the efforts to protect lives and property and the environment throughout this throughout the response phase as we transition from response into recovery. Continue to coordinate all the emergency operations that we're doing here and in our regional centers and at the local EOCs. Work to make sure that all of the critical infrastructure lifeline restoration gets done in this next operational period, working with our private sector utility partners, telecoms, and supply chain management groups. We'll continue to provide accurate public information as to what's happening with regards to the response and recovery. And then we'll focus on meeting whatever unmet needs are throughout the region for health and medical and people with access and functional needs. Let me just say also that as we transition to recovery today, it's sort of two things happening. We're still responding, but we're moving into place these assets that really can focus on determining the total amount of damage, and so that we can really start to work progressively to get individuals and the community back up in the normal way of life. So that is going to be a big focus, and we will probably, as the operational period goes on into tonight, tomorrow, you'll see some transitioning of response resources being demobilized and different resources being activated to be able to cover the various kinds of needs that will take place. And so the State Operations Center here with all the state and federal and private sector resources will remain fully activated until further notice. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any details on the number of injuries and severity of those?
I don't have the final number of injuries. We do know that there were a number of injuries, and but most of them I would characterize in the minor to moderate level, and no report of any fatalities. So I think we're very lucky there, and happy there wasn't anything worse.
Can you talk about the conversations you've been having with the private utilities, especially as it pertains to gas lines, and then you have this added concern with wildfire potential?
Well, you know, we've been working very closely with the utilities over the course of the last few months in the effort of preparing communities as a result of public safety power shutoffs, and so that's helped to build that coalition in the effort of making sure that communities are as prepared as possible. We generally have, though, here embedded in the State Operations Center, the California Utility Emergency Association is an association that represents all of the power, water, wastewater utility providers of telecommunications. They're embedded here, and they have been working very, very diligently, ensuring that that the priority to get power to things like the hospital is done first, and then, you know, as they move forward and branch out, that the rest of the community gets back up and operational. Right now, there's a big effort on doing gas leak detection, so they've got a lot of sniffer vehicles out there and other kinds of equipment to ensure that that the gas mains or the gas lines get fixed. That's going to always be an issue after an earthquake, and that could take a few days to be able to address that.
Can we go over safety tips for people that they tend to forget how to act if an earthquake happens?
Yeah. So, well, the first thing is that if you're in a structure and you start to feel an aftershock or another earthquake, you want to drop, cover, and hold on. The idea is to get under something that is strong and heavy that will protect you in the event of anything that may be falling. You want to cover the back of your head and crouch down under that heavy piece of furniture. Standing in doorways is not a good idea. Standing next to a refrigerator is not a good idea. Refrigerators will move significantly and doors swing. Best to get down underneath something that's solid and in place to be able to protect yourself. If you're driving, pull to the side of the road, put your car in park and stop in a safe location until the shaking stops. Really not want to go running outside if you're in a high rise. Use the stairwells after the shaking stops to go down the stairwells. Do not use the elevator. Be cognizant of things like glass that may be on the ground or falling glass above you if you do go outdoors. Important to have you know, an emergency kit and some supplies. If you have not gotten those yet, go to one of the stores that's open and get some water and supplies in the event that there is an aftershock. The potential is talking with California Geologic Survey and the United States Geologic Survey, the seismologists. There is will be a significant number of aftershocks, but there is a 5% chance that you could get another earthquake as large as this earthquake last night. So we want to make sure that people over the next 24 to 48 hours are prepared and cognizant of what to do should more earthquakes occur. Any other questions?
Okay, folks, that's not necessarily the one I wanted to show you guys, but I went ahead and did it anyway from the Office of Emergency Services right there. I do want to play the most recent one from the USGS folks here, and that's the one I was trying to play, but we'll see if we can't get it to go.
Main shock at the northeast end. Then that was followed by a magnitude 5.4 aftershock at 4:07 yesterday morning, and then in the evening on Friday, things picked up rather quickly with a magnitude 5 foreshock at 8:16 p.m. and then a magnitude 7.1 main shock at 8:19 p.m. So when that 7.1 occurred, we called that the main shock because it's the biggest event so far in the sequence, and we call the previous events all foreshocks to that main shock. Now, that main shock ruptured the fault, as you can see, from the bottom of the picture down there on your right, from the Garlock fault, if you like, all the way up towards the coastal geothermal field, which is a distance of about 30 miles. And so if you look at the epicenter of magnitude 6.4, then it was rupturing, the 7.1 ruptured 10 miles to the south of that and 20 miles to the north. And it had a depth of about 8 to 10 miles. So since then, we've had 6 magnitude 5 or greater aftershocks, none greater than 6, but one greater than magnitude 5.5 at 8:47 last night. So far, we have a complete picture of the magnitude 3 and larger, and so far we have processed data from about 2,600 aftershocks, of which 52 events are greater than magnitude 4. And we have about 340 events of magnitude greater than 3. So if you think about how there is many more small earthquakes than big ones, then our goal is to have a complete catalog of earthquakes down to a magnitude 1. So that's 2 orders of magnitude smaller than what we have, smaller magnitude than what we have now. So we expect that this sequence will generate over 30,000 earthquakes of magnitude 1 and greater. So to actually harness that information out of our data streams, we are now loading the data onto Caltech supercomputers and plan to use AI and machine learning codes to get that information out of our data streams. So the USGS has calculated probabilities for a magnitude 7 in the next week. It's now down to 3%. It was 6% yesterday. And the probability of magnitude 6 is 27%. So we're likely to see maybe 1 or 2 of those in the next week. So those are the main points that we wanted to raise today. Are there any?
How strong was the earthquake felt here in Los Angeles?
It was, so the earthquake was a magnitude 7.1, and that describes the size of the earthquake itself. Now, the way we describe how things are felt in LA is with what's called shake map, which is the color map on here. And unfortunately, this color scale is not showing, but the shaking in LA was somewhere between modified Mercalli 2 to 3, mostly. In occasional places, it may have gone up to 4. So that means people felt it, but things were not being knocked off shelves.
Can you elaborate a little bit more, Doctor, on the science of foreshocks and main shocks and how that works? What excuse me, what triggers one or the other?
So foreshock, main shock, and aftershocks is nomenclature that we use to identify the events. So the biggest event in any given sequence is referred to as the main shock. Anything before that event is referred to as a foreshock. Anything after the main shock is referred to as aftershocks. If we have a big event, like in this case a 6.4, followed by 7.1, for a while the 6.4 is the main shock, but then we transfer the name of main shock onto the bigger event that occurs later.
Was this a fault line that you guys were watching? Were you expecting a large earthquake here eventually?
Well, we're expecting large earthquakes on all the faults in Southern California. In particular, this area is quite active and has been active since we've had good records since the 1930s. And particularly since the 1980s, there's been quite a few events, and in the 1990s. And for a while, Ridgecrest was known as the earthquake capital of the world because they had so many small earthquakes. And so it's not a big surprise that this sequence happened.
Is there a network of faults along one main fault there, or is it like a swarm?
It's kind of a broad area, about 10, 15 miles across, where there's a network of faults, and that's why we refer to it as the Little Lake Fault Zone, with emphasis on zone. It's quite wide. So the deformation is not concentrated along one strand, like, for instance, along the San Andreas, where most of the deformation is on the main fault itself, where the width of it is maybe a few tens of meters, as opposed to here, you're talking about 10, 15 miles.
For people in LA County who have been nervous by the shaking we're feeling from this Searles Valley sequence, is there any incidents where, even in a bigger quake or in a quake that was triggered by the Searles Valley sequence, any scenario in which there could be damage in the LA area from a quake of that sort?
Could you repeat that question?
Sure. We're feeling these earthquakes from this sequence in Searles Valley. Is there any scenario in which earthquakes that far away could cause damage here in LA County with the way in which we're feeling them?
It's very unlikely. We haven't seen any damage from these earthquakes, but earthquakes at this distance can cause some damage in very isolated cases, especially if the ground is very soft and saturated with water. It can induce liquefaction at a great distance, but in this case, it hasn't happened.
How big would an earthquake need to be where these are happening for us to have any damage here?
It probably would have to be more like, say, the 7.8 on the San Andreas Fault. But in some respects, these earthquakes, we're lucky in that the energy in them is mostly going to the north, away from Los Angeles. If they were rupturing from north to south, then there would be more likelihood to have damage in, say, Palmdale or other areas that are a bit closer than, say, downtown LA to this activity.
Do you have seismologists out there at the epicenter, and what are they seeing? Is there scars on the earth?
Yeah, there are both seismologists and geologists looking for the scarp from the first 6.4 as well as the 7.1, and they are seeing very clear scarps in the ground. Most of those features are within the China Lake Naval Weapons Center, so access is somewhat limited, but they are able to fly helicopters to take video and collect important scientific data.
Yesterday on that map that's slightly covered, it looked like a pretty solid L, and now there's a lot of spread out dots, blue dots. Is that the 10 to 15 miles that you're talking about across?
Maybe Rob Clayton could point for me, or Rob Graves, is he there? So let me...
He's coming.
Okay. So let me explain that again.
The map is
Yeah, so if you see the map in the upper right-hand corner, it's now like a T. So on the leg that's pointing towards me, that's the one that, so point at the epicenter of the 6.4. There, yeah. So it ruptured to the southwest towards Ridgecrest, and that's about 10 or 12 miles long. And then the 7.1 was located a little bit further north, like there. And it ruptured bilaterally in two directions, both to the southeast as well as to the northwest.
Sir, correct me if I'm wrong, so these earthquakes are coming to surface?
Yeah.
The 7.1 was shallow compared to the 6.4?
I don't think we can tell yet, but they're all probably at a very similar depth, in that they go down to about 8 miles and then they rupture up to the surface.
So can you explain, when it ruptures up to the surface, what does that do, and how does that come, what does that speak to when we talk about damage and how we are feeling it?
So what it means that the earthquake is a moment on a fault, which is a zone of weakness in the ground. And one side translates relative to the other. And in this case, we don't know exactly how much it moved. That's why we have geologists out there measuring it. Could be anywhere from a few inches to maybe a few feet. And the damage would mostly be if you have a structure, bridge, or a building built across the fault, then that could be, the earthquakes could cut it in half or severely deform it. So that's one issue. Most damage from earthquakes is actually from ground shaking, not from fault offsets. But there are regulations in the state that for major earthquake faults, you're not allowed to build a building across the fault because it's not a good idea.
Are we still looking at 2 faults then? And do we know what faults those are?
We're looking at 2 fault strands within a fault zone. So it's a broad zone of many, many faults, and there are 2 strands within the Little Lake fault zone that are active. One pointing towards me to the southeast or towards Ridgecrest, and the other one is the northwest trend that you see on there in that T. And so that's still part of the same deformation zone.
But they don't have specific names on those 2 faults?
Not yet, no.
Can we talk about probability again? Yesterday, Dr. Jones had said there was a 1 in 20 chance that we could see an earthquake bigger than the 7.1
Yeah.
following last night's
Yeah.
earthquake. As in any earthquake, she said. What is that probability now?
It's 3%. Instead of yesterday, it was 5%. Now it's down to 3%.
Okay, and what about for a 7, a 6?
No, so 7 and greater is 3%. 6 and greater is 27%. So we are really likely to see a 6-ish size event in the next few days or the next week.
What was the projected number of aftershocks again? Over what period of time will these occur?
So most of the earthquakes, aftershocks, occur in the first few days after the main shock. And so far, we have recorded about 340 events of magnitude 3 and greater, and we feel like that is a fairly complete record. So if you include all the 2s and 1s, that will be about 34,000 aftershocks for this sequence.
34,000?
Yeah.
In what period of time?
That would be over the first, say, 6 months or so.
Can you talk at all about the Shake Alert LA app? I know since it's originally happened on Thursday, they have now, I guess, or plan to now lessen the intensity restrictions.
I could say a few things about that, but Shake Alert itself is a project run by the U.S. Geological Survey, and the university partners like Caltech, UC Berkeley, and others are participating in developing that system. That system functioned as designed and issued an alert 8 seconds after the main shock, magnitude 7.1, and kept issuing alerts so people who were using our development tools were able to get warnings. Shake Alert LA is an app that's developed by City of LA. It listens for messages from the Shake Alert system. Sorry about the confusion of the naming, but that app is set for fairly high thresholds and mostly to warn on earthquakes in LA County. And currently the USGS committees that govern the sort of release of messages and so forth are meeting, and we've put in a strong plug to them to actually lower the thresholds, because there is some misunderstanding in that the USGS thinks they should only warn on damaging shaking, but it's clear that people want warnings even though the shaking is not damaging.
When we talk about an earthquake of this magnitude happening closer to Los Angeles, how well prepared are we with our structural integrity and our response times from your perspective to deal with something like this, if this were to happen closer to our city?
I think in some ways we've done a lot. It's clear that the City of LA, with various retrofitting ordinances, has stepped forward and is spearheading, leading other cities to improve the infrastructure. But a lot.
Okay, folks, hey, jumping in right now, just I was trying to get the video to work for that, but I just couldn't get the video to come up, so I went ahead and played the audio there from that press conference as well. So a little bit of information there from some professionals out there that seem to know what they're talking about. That was definitely a real cough, I think. So hopefully, you know, they know what they're talking about. One thing I find very interesting is the fact that we're expecting over 6 months, is what they stated, and this includes all magnitudes. 34,000 earthquakes is what they're expecting from this sequence of aftershock activity and everything else. So it'd be very interesting to see exactly how many we do get. There's definitely been quite a bit of aftershock activity, and I'm sure it will continue for quite some time. So yeah, I'm going to still continue to look for a new station down in Southern California that's a little bit closer to the aftershock activity. I can't get it to come up. I'm not for sure what's going on, but I will definitely continue to try on this end. And then of course, as just one more time looking at the map here of the California area, still shows, let's go ahead and zoom in real quick. Latest updates are over 3,000 earthquakes, and we got a long ways to go before we hit 34,000. Wow, I just can't believe they threw out that number. But anyway, quite a bit of activity still continuing, folks. Within the last 2 days, over 3,000 earthquakes, and it will continue for quite some time. So anyway, that update video lasted a little bit longer than I wanted to, but either way, I wanted to play some more information on those news conferences from the OES department there, and also I can't remember the guy's name there with the other press conference, but some valuable information there for folks that may wanted to hear it again. I'm going to get back to the live stream here and get the video uploaded onto the channel here, and like I say, if you are watching here, I do hope that you subscribe and whatnot. We try not to we try not to predict earthquakes or forecast them. We kind of look at areas, and I've been looking at Southern California for quite some time here. I think a lot of people have. You know, I could say I've been looking at it since I was a kid, but a lot of issues kind of pointed towards that region here over the past week, with all the activity over off the coast of Oregon and up through Vancouver Island, and then some swarming that happened there in Southern California last week, I believe it is. All kind of pointed towards something big happening down there, and of course that's what's going on right now. So hopefully that's all that's going to happen, but you never know, folks. It is the Earth. We've only been keeping records for a very microsecond of Earth's record, you know. So you know, those people, they go to school and they got their college degree and whatnot up on their wall, and they make tons of money, and you know, they know what the Earth is going to do. But I don't think they can really say that with 100% certainty. You know, it's going to do what it's going to do, and there's nothing no man can do about it, or woman, or whatever. You know, it's going to happen. So be on guard, folks. Be prepared. You know, now is a better time than ever to make sure you're stocked up on necessity items. You know, I don't know, maybe if you got a nice TV or something, tie it down with some ropes or some straps. Put all your valuable knickknacks and china plates away. You know, it's just good to be prepared here over the next couple months. So, but the more important time frame I'm thinking right now is over the next week. So yeah, let's just be on guard, and hope everyone stays safe out there. We'll be back a little bit later, folks, on the live stream. Right now I'm going to get the updated video out here, and hope everyone has a great day out there and is enjoying their weekend. Peace out. Have a good one.